I put in the 3-bet to 15k, fully expecting him to 4-bet shove very frequently. It folds around, back to him. He doesn't take too long to push all in. After getting through day 1 of the WSOPE Europe Main Event, I had some time to get away from the tables to reset. Tournament poker can be incredibly draining with the long hours and constant pressure. Stepping back for a bit is sometimes just as important as the hands you play. I took some time to explore the city, clearing my head and recharging a bit. Fortunately, the atmosphere in Prague makes it really easy to do that. And by the time day 2 came around, I felt refreshed, focused, and ready to get back into the battle at the main event. So the biggest difference for day 2 is the tournament structure. The levels now jump up to 90 minutes compared to 60 on day 1, which totally changes the pace of the tournament. With deeper stacks, players are not as quickly forced into short stack decisions, and there's more room to actually play poker, apply pressure, and navigate spots properly. This is the type of structure I prefer and tend to do well in. Let's get back into the action. So the blinds are 1500, 2500. It's my big blind and I look down at King 3 offsuit. It folds around to the button, who opens to 5k. The player to my right flats the 5k. I was one of the bigger stacks on this table and I have them both covered. I decided to make a play here and raise to 22,000. King 3 offsuit is one of those trashy hands with a high card that make it a good candidate for a bluff raise, and I also think by doing this on this new table, I'm able to start cultivating an aggressive image early on. Luckily, after the button folds, the big blind reluctantly folds as well. Next hand, I'm in the low jack and look down at ace 7 of hearts. It folds around to me, I make a raise to 5k. And everybody folds except for the big blind, who decides to put in the call. We go heads up to the flop of King of Hearts, Queen of Hearts, King of Clubs. The big blind checks, and with the nut flush draw, I put in a c-bet of 3,500. The big blind thinks about it for a bit, and does decide to put in the call. The turn is the 5 of diamonds. The big blind checks again. Here on this board texture against the big blind, he could have a really wide range of hands, from King X, Queen X, to straight draws, smaller flush draws. Holding ace high here, I do have some showdown value and could bluff catch the river. However, I do have a big range advantage, and I think that putting in a second barrel will apply a lot of pressure to his entire range. I do decide to make close to a pot size bet of 20k. Of course, he's never folding if he has King X. But with Queen X, this does apply maximum pressure, as he does have to worry about facing another large bet on the river. It looked like he was starting to get tired of folding to me, but after a while, he does pitch in his cards. The blinds are up, 1500, 3000. I'm under the gun +1, and I look down at ace 7 suited again, this time of clubs. I raise it up to 6k, it folds all the way around to the big blind, who makes the defend. The flop comes 10 of hearts, 3 of clubs, 6 of diamonds. He checks. Just like in the last hand, facing the big blind, his range is very wide here. My hand has quite a bit of potential on this flop, with both a backdoor straight draw and the nut flush draw. I decide to start with a bet of 5k. He thinks about it for a bit and does put in the call. The turn is a favorable one. The ace of diamonds now giving me top pair. The big blind checks. Whether or not the ace did hit my hand, I'd be betting this turn card a lot, and in this case it's no different, so I do go for a second bet, this time of 13k. The big blind thinks about it for a bit, and decides to call again. The river comes the 9 of clubs. The big blind checks, and now I have a decision of either going for another street of value or taking this hand to showdown. The 9 does complete 7-8 for the straight, but he would probably have to have 7-8 of diamonds in order to call the turn bet, and that's only one combo. Of course, he could have combinations of 2 pair, such as 10-9, ace-3, ace-6, but I think I'm also ahead of a lot of hands that could get to the river this way, so if he has 10x of diamonds, or just a 10 that decides to get sticky, I might be able to get one more street of value. I decide to go for a third bet, this time for 25k. I think it is quite thin, but I have built up quite an aggressive image on this table. He thinks about it for quite a while. It looked like he really wanted to call, but eventually does slide his hand into the muck. So not long after that hand, just a few hands later, I'm on the button and look down at pocket kings. It folds around to the hijack, who is the same player that I just beat last hand. he raises it up to 6k. He's pretty short stacked, he has about 18 big blinds. So when he raises off this stack size, he's pretty polarized. I put in the 3-bet to 15k, fully expecting him to 4-bet shove very frequently. It folds around, back to him. He doesn't take too long to push all in. Turns out he has pocket queens. Very unfortunate for him, and it's just a big cooler as I would have been willing to get it all in against his stack with hands much weaker than kings. One table over to my right, I see Jesse Lannis, one of the crushers in the tournament world, who's been coming off an insane run over the last couple years. Just a reminder that this main event isn't getting any softer, with plenty of high caliber players like him scattered throughout the field. But even with a tough field, there's not much my opponents can do when I keep getting huge hands. I have queens this time, under the gun +1, and raise it up to 6k. The player in the cutoff calls, and the big blind calls as well. We go 3 ways to the flop of 8 of spades, 4 hearts, deuce of clubs. The big blind checks. This is a seemingly safe flop for my hand. I make a c-bet of 7k. The cutoff instantly folds, and the big blind puts in the call. The turn comes the 4 of spades. Now pairing the 4 on the board, the big blind can definitely be check calling the flop with a 4. So when he decides to check, I'm happy to check it back. The river is the king of clubs. Now he decides to lead for 13k. This was a little bit confusing for me, as I wasn't sure if he would value bet an 8 on this specific river, but I'm not going to fold to this size, so I do toss in the call, and he turns over 5-6 of diamonds. So he had a double gut shot straight draw on the flop. And now seeing his hand, I'm actually quite surprised that he took such a passive line. With just 6 high, but holding a very hidden draw, I think many players would elect to check raise the flop, or choose to apply a lot of pressure when the 4 pairs. Next hand, I'm in the cutoff with 10-8 of spades. Everybody folds to me. We're still at the 1500-3000 blind level. I raise it up to 6k. Only the big blind makes the call. We go heads up to the flop of king of spades, 7 of diamonds, 6 of clubs. I flopped a gut shot to the nut straight, as well as the backdoor flush draw. The big blind checks, and decide to put in a c-bet of 4k. The big blind does decide to put in the call. The turn is an interesting card, the 5 of diamonds, which now gives me additional outs to hit the straight, but it's also a card that connects with the big blind's calling range a lot. He decides to lead out for 15k. I glanced over at his stack. I did have him covered, but he did have quite a bit of pink chips, which is the 25k chip, so we were still quite deep, and with one more street to play, I decided to put in the call. Unfortunately, the river is the 7 of hearts, bricked everything, and there's not much I can do when my opponent decides to bet again, and this time for a huge bet of 65k. I guess I'm kind of glad I have an easy decision here, versus if I had a hand like ace-king, which would have been a really tough spot. Next hand, I'm in the cutoff again, and this time I have ace-queen offsuit. The player under the gun +2 decides to just open shove all in. This player had sat down not too long ago and replaced the other player I had busted earlier, so I didn't have much information except for the amount of the all-in, which ended up being 44,000. I'm not in love with the situation. I think I'm flipping with a pocket pair a lot, but I do think I have to put in the call here. There's no reason to re-raise, as my cold call looks equally strong, and there's still a few players left to act who could wake up with a huge hand. But the other players do fold, and my opponent turns over ace-king, one of the hands I didn't want to see. I'm in bad shape, and an even worse shape when the flop comes 2 kings.
And
oh, not there. So he gets a full double up. Luckily, it wasn't too big of a dent to my stack. Soon after that hand, the blinds are raised to 2k, 4k, and our table breaks. When tables start breaking, the good news is that more and more players are being eliminated. However, the not so great news for me is that I felt like I had built an advantageous dynamic on this table and had most of the players playing pretty straightforwardly against me. It would have been great to keep playing against these players for the rest of day 2. During the break in the action, I was very fortunate to run into Annette Oberstadt, who famously won the very first WSOPE Europe main event back in 2007 and is back this year to try to win it again. To this day, she remains the only female champion to ever win this event. We ended up chatting about a bunch of interesting topics, from her thoughts on GTO, how she views today's competition compared to the old days, and she also shares some really useful strategic insights. Our full convo will be released in a separate upcoming video soon, so keep an eye out for that. For now, it's time to refocus and find my new table. The night is young, there's still 4 more levels to go in day 2, and plenty of poker left to be played.
喜欢我的影片，不要忘记按赞、订阅、打开小铃铛。